Okay, so welcome everyone to the Saturday morning questions and answers discussion about misophonia. Happy to have you with us. I appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure we'll have a few more join us as time goes on. I don't have a particular topic today to kind of cover it first, but I wanted to discuss. I guess I do have a topic that's kind of the basic models of misophonia where you hear a trigger and you feel this instant anger and rage and disgust. There may be, some people may think, yeah, I'm also having physical reactions. What our research shows is that you hear a sound and there's a physical response in your body. There's a bump to your body, and that triggers the emotions and all kinds of physical reactions. Um, just briefly, I did a short test of this with at the Misophonia Association convention. Said, do you have this physical reflex or not? And half said yes, half said no. And then after showing them their reflexes, 9 said yes and 1 still said no. So I see this physical reflex every day when I work with people with misophonia. Dr. Mitchell and I took this basic simple model of misophonia that you hear the trigger, there's a physical reflex in your body that I call the initial physical reflex of misophonia, and that triggers the emotions, the distress, and then the things you do. And then this more complete model that Dr. Mitchell and I developed includes anticipatory anxiety and avoidance. And that's something we've always understood, that there is this anticipation that you feel going into a situation where there might be triggers. There's also not just a mental kind of worry about being triggered, there's also some physical reactions in the body that go on with anxiety kind of a response where your brain is remembering being in these kind of situations and you're having a unconscious tension and distress. Then the trigger, so that's before the trigger. Then during the trigger, you hear the trigger, there's a bump to your body, and this bump occurs about 200 milliseconds, 2/10 of a second after the trigger starts. So it's extremely fast. You can't, it seems it happens almost simultaneously. And then maybe another 50 or 100 milliseconds, you get these intense negative emotions. You start experiencing this physiological distress in your body. Thoughts are just being jammed into your brain of that's disgusting, or I hate that, or I hate them. Then you're also having these urges to leave the room, to cover your ears. And then there's many people have what almost looks like a reflex to the trigger, and the EDB stands for emotion-driven behavior. It's like, stop! And it feels so automatic that it's a reflex, but because it's turned to the person doing it, it's not a brainstem reflex. It's an emotion-driven behavior that is just, the emotions are just so strong that it feels like it's just jerked out of you. But because it's not a reflex, it can be reduced and changed with effort. Then after the trigger is over, we have our coping responses. And the covert mental review, the self-talk that you go through, that was horrible, I can't stand that, don't they know that they know, I've told them it bothers me 100 times and they still do it, they must not care, they're so, thoughtless about this. And this mental review can go on from seconds to hours for people. And this kind of mental review can just continue to keep you riled up and in that triggered state. And so reducing this mental review, this self-talk, is very important for reducing the misophonia in many people. And then the overt behavior. What do you actually do? Do you cover your ears? Do you leave the room? Do you complain? Just some people get violent, punch walls, but that's that outward behavior that others can see. And then there's an environmental response and a consequence to you, the misophonia sufferer. People may scold you, parents for children may scold them, they may tell them it's all in their head, they may coddle them and try to protect them and try to make them feel better. But this environmental action also feeds back into this whole misophonia chain. So this is the basic model that we feel of misophonia being triggered. It's what we use to do the misophonia treatment work that we do. And this is going to be the basic model. This is going to be used by Dr. Sam Spencer at the University of North Texas for the treatment trial that he is conducting there this fall. Should be starting in September with a treatment trial. And so Misophonia Institute has funded this treatment trial due to based on or because of generous donations of people who have provided us with the resources to support Dr. Spencer. And I'm especially excited to get Dr. Spencer involved in good misophonia research because he's a new professor. He doesn't have a large established funding of grants that focus him and keep him in some specific characteristic of OCD treatment or anxiety or whatever. And he's really interested in treatment, effective treatment. And so this will be a great chance to get Dr. Spencer, who has done misophonia research already, but to get him funded and going in a way of doing misophonia research. So this will be a pilot study, and then he hopes to have follow-on, more larger, controlled trial, so that it shows more clearly that this treatment is effective. So I want to just share that. Any comments or questions about this? Anybody have any thing you want to say at this time?
Yes, I do.
Yes, go ahead, Joanne.
For 30 years, I've been on antidepressants because every doctor I went to said misophonia. They didn't know the term, but they said it was due to OCD. And after all these years, it hasn't helped with that, but I don't know if I should try to get off of them. Is it really helping me as far as anxiety that I should continue? I don't know. I'm kind of stuck with that because they didn't recognize misophonia. They called it OCD.
Well, I will say that there is some research that shows that if you have depression or anxiety, that taking an antidepressant can be beneficial for you. So it's not hurting you. So if you've been on, I'm assuming it's an SSRI of some kind. If you've been on the SSRI and you're feeling good, excluding the misophonia, I don't see a need to change. Because if your mood, this is your misophonia severity and this is your mood, And as your mood improves, your misophonia goes down. And as your mood decreases, your misophonia goes up.
Okay.
So if it's helping you feel good, why change it?
Okay.
Right? I understand the mistake of calling it OCD. That's quite a common misconception. Dr. Mitchell, who's, I mentioned with this last model of misophonia, he contacted me in 2018 to understand what what I knew about misophonia, what I thought about misophonia. And he had he's an OCD expert therapist. And he had been to an OCD uh, training session, and they mentioned misophonia. They said, yeah, misophonia is a form of OCD, so just use the standard OCD treatment, which is exposure and response prevention. In other words, for misophonia, hear a trigger and don't react. And he said, I went back to my practice, and I had a couple of patients with misophonia who were very interested to try something. He said, so I said, well, this is what I was told. Let's give it a try. He said, and I could just see how it didn't work at all. He said they were jumping and moving, and these were very, very motivated people who willingly asked to do this exposure and response prevention. And he said it didn't work at all. It was just very clear that that was not a form of OCD. And so then he contacted me, and I explained the fact that misophonia has this physical reflex in it. And so that you're hearing that sound, and then somewhere in your body there's a tensing of shoulders or hands or holding your breath. And he went back to his people and started working with them and started having fantastic success. And so he and I were at the American Psychological Association convention in Chicago, I believe it was, handing out information about misophonia. And we had written information, but we also had these little angry balls. And on the back it says, Misophonia Institute, misophonia, a conditioned extreme reaction to subtle stimuli. And so it has the logo and the website. And it was kind of easy to get decent people hands, hey, you want a squeeze ball, an angry ball, right? Everybody has happy balls, but this is an angry ball. And so we gave out about 2,000 of these to psychologists. And it was in August, and he was telling me that he was going to have to bring down his clinical practice because school was going to start again. And so he would need to, get his clinical practice down so he's not taking new patients. And I said, or something about that. I said, well, I guess you're not taking any new patients. He says, well, except for misophonia patients, because they're easy. And I said, they're easy? What do you mean they're easy? And he said, well, he says, yeah, and he described kind of the differences between what he was doing and what I was doing. And he did a lot of counter conditioning. And counter conditioning is where you're putting misophonia into a different perspective. He said, I like to play catch with people, and they're throwing the ball back and forth where there's a little bit of a trigger playing. He says, and when I see them start to become worried about thinking about the sound, he says, I throw the ball where they have to kind of reach up and jump for it and get them back into this throwing the ball. And that kind of work allows the brain to let it go, because that lizard brain, that brainstem of ours, is watching, and you hear a sound and it zaps you, and then your head explodes with the emotions. And then it watches and it says, did I predict correctly? And the normal reaction to that little zap is, if it's in your shoulders, you tense your shoulders more. And if it stops you from breathing, you hold your breath. And so the natural physical reaction to getting jabbed gives feedback to the lizard brain that it's doing the right thing, and that maybe it should even hit you harder. So the normal experience of triggers makes them get worse and worse and worse. But if you're doing the opposite, or if you're doing something that takes you away from that physical response, in this case he was saying keeping your eye on the ball and playing catch, then the lizard brain says, oh, there's that sound, you're going to tighten this muscle, and it goes boom and hits you. And instead of reacting, you go, oh, I got to catch that ball. Trigger, stop breathing. No, I'm going to keep breathing. And that feedback to the brainstem allows it to be released and let go. And so then it can just start to die out. Now, this is a process, and it's very hard. Misophonia typically is a chronic condition. And so you have to keep doing the right thing when triggers happen, which is either relaxing or breathing or both, and carrying on with what you're doing. And that allows the triggers to go down and to stay down. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about an example of it going down and staying down. But I have a hand up from Roz. Roz, go ahead and talk to us.
Hi. Hi, Tom. I wanted to have you address those of us that have the anticipatory issues, because I've stopped myself from many things because of the fact that I have to look out for where I'm going to sit, and the noise factors and being surrounded by people. And there's so many factors that are involved in the process of going anywhere that a lot of times it prevents me from doing it. So how do you address that with people?
So Roz, by the way, Roz and I have known each other for over a year or two in Misophonia world. And, Roz, as you've experienced, when your mood is up and you're focused on going and doing something that was worthwhile, then your interest level in the activity helps to reduce the thoughts and the worries and the stress. When every thought is about misophonia triggers and where am I going to be and how I'm going to handle it, it puts you in more of a higher state of anxiety. So this is kind of an avalanche problem, right? That it starts with a worry, and the worry becomes 2 worries, and then the worries become 10 worries, and you can't get away from it. I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I meant to say psychologist because of how do you control the mind. The best advice that I have is to focus on the here and now. Mindfulness. What are you seeing in your room right now? What are you doing right now? What can you touch and feel or smell right now? And focus on the immediate situation and sensations that you're experiencing in the world, and carry on. I think there's a kind of a story that says zebras don't have anxiety, or why zebras don't have anxiety. And so the problem with humans is we have this thing called language, where we can talk about our experiences. But if a zebra is chased by a lion and gets away, then they're in a little meadow area, and there's grass, and they're going, oh, there's grass, I'm going to eat the grass. And they're just in the present moment, where if you and I were chased by a lion and then we were out in another area, we would be talking about how scary it was with that lion, and what if the lion comes out now, and is it going to catch us next time? And we're all talking this up in our brain, and it's that rumination, that talking about it, that keeps it strong and active and in our present awareness. And so the best, there's two things that I ask people to do for this problem of anticipatory anxiety. One is trying to have the tools that you need to handle a situation, right? Having AirPods or earplugs for if it's loud noise, or having a way that you know you're going to be able to separate yourself, go to the bathroom, but having some way of handling the triggers. And I think the other part of handling the triggers is learning through experience that, for example, if it's a breath reflex, that if you do slow, steady breathing during a trigger situation, that it reduces the severity of the trigger. And that reducing the severity of the trigger, then instead of dealing with, facing a lion, you're facing a bobcat. And instead of facing a bobcat, you're facing, a big house cat. And it brings, you start to learn what you can handle and what you can do to deal with the misophonia if needed. And learning that whole system of learning that you can handle the situation starts to bring down the anticipatory anxiety. The second thing is to try to, with anticipatory anxiety, is to focus on stimuli, to keep your mind anywhere but on the fretting and the worrying and the reminding yourself of where you might be, was last time that something didn't work right. And the more you talk about it, the worse anxiety it is. And so the more you can just deal with the present awareness of other stimuli, it's usually easier to take our mind away from the anxiety or from the trigger. And this, by the way, this is a very good for when triggers are happening. If you can focus on other stimuli, what can you smell as you breathe in? Notice the air coming in through your nose, noticing how it feels. And in a situation, you may actually zone out from what the other people there are talking about, if it's a dinner activity or something like that, because you're being triggered. But to focus on other stimuli and carry on is the thing to do for anxiety. Relax. Anxiety includes a lot of tense muscles. And for those of you that have worked with me or have heard me talking over the past about progressive muscle relaxation training, right? The ability to relax your muscles on demand. So it's relax and focus and carry on. But I know that that's impossible to do when you're totally overwhelmed. So that's having a good way of handling situations can reduce that. But there are some people who, and many people at certain times in their lives, where the worries are so prevalent and in your face all the time that it's super difficult, or impossible even, to get past that anxiety feeling. So I know it's difficult when it's an overwhelming time, but again, focusing, carrying on, and relaxing and breathing or the things that I recommend that people try. Now, that's far easier to say than for you to do it, right, Roz?
Well, only because I met a really good friend for lunch yesterday, and the music was so loud in the restaurant, and I tried all those things, and then I resorted to one earplug and then the second earplug, and then I couldn't hear her. I just saw her mouth moving, and I knew that wasn't very good. And so when she wasn't looking, I pulled them out. So sometimes, you know, that some of us might get into situations where you can't do anything about it, and so then you just, what I like to call, suffer through it.
Yeah. Well, and you know, Roz, maybe you could have said, if this is a really good friend, you could have said, you know, the music is too loud for me and it's triggering my misophonia. Can we get a carry out and go to a park?
We had just come back from a park,
Yeah, I
actually.
know, but you could still take the food, right? Because it's just too. Can we go eat in the car? Can we go stand around the car and eat? I mean, just,
Yeah,
you know, and the better the friend is, the more they can understand and help you know that.
it's true. She is a good friend and she knows, and you know what? It was total embarrassment. I was just like, she knows, she sees it so often in me. I was just too embarrassed to like go at that point to say that. So I just,
Well,
it's
you know,
embarrassing.
I know we have our own personas and our own what's embarrassing and what's not embarrassing, but you know, that's one of the things that over our life we should be working to get rid of, right? To get past. Because
Thank
misophonia
you.
is not a mental disorder. It is a reflex condition that's triggering a physiological and an emotional response. And getting past some of the stigma uh, of this is very beneficial. But I know it's a challenge. Right? I know it's a challenge. So, Marge, what do you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, could you ask the waiter, like, you know, just say, could you turn the music down? Would that have worked?
You're muted, Roz. Go ahead.
I've done that in many restaurants. This restaurant was full, so it wasn't going to cater around Roz. So I knew I just had to bite the bullet.
Well, then you bite the bullet and get your carry out and vote with your feet.
So I ended up being so stressed that I came home and slept, because that's how stressed it got me.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I mean, it's a horrible experience. I'm sorry that you got stuck in that. And it didn't make your misophonia any better over time. Those kind of experiences, well, that one wasn't as much misophonia as it was just overwhelmed with the volume. So at least that didn't, it's not like being stuck with a person making triggers for a meal, which makes your misophonia worse. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Can I ask,
Joanne and then Marge.
do you or have any associates that do personal sessions virtually? There's nobody in Florida that I can go to.
I do. I do the vast majority of my sessions virtually.
Okay.
So yeah, send me an email and I'll send you information.
Okay.
And
Marge.
yeah, so okay, my partner, he has had this habit of like pulling on his nose. Well, I'm sorry, pulling on his nose and then or rubbing his mustache and things like that, or just touching his face. And I've mentioned it to him. You know, he tries not to do it.
Right.
And so that really helps that he tries, he tries not to do it. And I'm just curious, like, could that be somewhat like of a sign of like autism, like Asperger's syndrome or something, like, where you have to you're like doing self-stimulation kind of like.
Probably not. Touching your beard, rubbing your beard, touching your nose. Those are, I'm sorry, did I trigger you? I didn't
No.
mean to if I did. Okay. But those are just normal human behaviors. Some people have wiggly feet that they just, unconsciously move their feet. It's not a sign of any particular problem. It's just normal human behavior. One of the first people I worked with, and I actually published a case study in a journal on this, I think called Clinical Case Studies is the name of the journal, was this woman who was triggered by her husband eating Italian ice or ice cream. It was a crunchy sound, scratching his beard, and just the sight of scratching his beard. And it was just something he normally did. He just, just kind of a unconscious behavior. And people have all kinds of unconscious behaviors.
Well, I mean, I'm tempted to ask him, like, why are you doing that? Why do you rub your mustache? But I don't know. I mean, I
So
don't understand.
do you don't understand?
Correct. Yeah.
There's just a little sensation, and he notices. So first off, humans our brain throws away most of our sensory input. So right now, everyone notice the feeling of your body pressing into the chair. You can notice that, right? But you haven't been noticing it. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So your brain was just blocking it out because it was a meaningless sensation. So when we have things that we learn to notice, we keep noticing it more. And so he may make a slight face motion, we do move our face occasionally, and he notices the physical sensation of his mustache. And so then, or he thinks about something and he goes, what's that? And just, it's almost like a little bit of a self-soothing, or it's an unconscious behavior. And so people develop these behaviors, and they're not bad. They're just bad to you if it triggers you. So when you see him starting to raise his hand, relax and close your eyes. Relax, breathe, and close your eyes.
Yeah, I do that. I mean, I kind of look away, or I mean, yeah.
But the more you can, part of your problem, Marge, our misophonia people problems, everyone, is that your brain has learned to look out for that stimulus because it's a dangerous stimulus to you. In the past, your brain has noticed you noticing that stimulus, and it has noticed you tightening your muscles or holding your breath. Now, do you know, Marge, if it affects your breathing, does it affect your muscles anywhere in your body?
Yeah, probably my breathing, or like in my stomach, maybe my stomach would tighten up.
Okay.
And
So the treatment is to relax your stomach and slowly breathe. And try to give your brain the message, this is not a time for you to zap me. So that's easy to say and hard to do.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I kind of think I know when the trigger started a long time ago, and but that doesn't help, I guess. But
It doesn't, does it? It doesn't help because your brainstem, your lizard brain, isn't paying attention to your thoughts. It strictly looks at, oh, you see him touching his mustache, and you held your breath, or you tightened up your abdomen. So relaxing and carrying on, relaxing and focusing away. So for example, are you, let's just suppose you're watching television together and he does this. Just put your focus on the TV screen, and I'm looking at your screen right now, and I'm seeing a picture of a black and white picture of a man, I think it's a man because it's short hair, with glasses, with big black rimmed glasses and a gentle little smile. And I'm seeing another colored outdoor kind of a picture on the other side of your back. And I'm trying to look at the details there rather than notice whatever stimulus is going on. So you can look at the television, you can focus on what you can see or smell, and trying to put your mind on other things while this is happening. Now, there's another thing you can do that Sean told us about last time. And Sean, tell us your trick about helping misophonia triggers.
Yeah, sure. So just a quick little intro. I've been doing Tom's treatment now for at least I think over half a year now, and I am having some success with this. And whenever there's a trigger, there's like this small window that we have where things can snowball out of control. For me, my heart rate goes bananas. I get this anger and all this other stuff, but there's this small window where I can I actually focus on a muscle that Tom has identified that kind of clenches whenever my trigger is starting. So I focus on relaxing that. Um, but then what I do mentally is I start to try to mimic the sound, and I try to change the context of it to be kind of like fun or funny. So with the example with the music playing, that's a tough one because that's a prolonged trigger. For me, that'd be a terrible situation for me to be in. But if I'm watching TV with my wife, and like we were watching something and there was a scene where this married couple was eating burgers, like very kind of like a pig, I guess would be a way to say it. And normally that would make my heart rate just spike up. And I'm having that kind of conflict in my head where I'm trying to say it's not that big a deal, relax, relax, and you're starting to get angry, and then I need to leave the room or turn the sound off. But so what I've been doing is, I don't know if this is true for y'all or not, but if somebody's eating, say, chips, and it's a crunchy sound or they're smacking or something, if you're eating chips also, um, at least for me, I don't really get triggered because I'm making the sound. So something I'm doing that helps, like going back to the burger thing, is in my mind, I'm mentally mimicking eating the burger, but then it's almost like I picture myself eating it with them. Um, And then I try to make it kind of like we're having fun or it's funny. So I change the context from being disgusting to like fun or funny. So I'm actually I'm having success with that. There's kind of a trade-off. So thankfully my heart rate doesn't go bananas and I don't get the anger, but it's taking up my mental bandwidth. Um, so I'm still having to, like, I lose focus in what's going on around me because I'm having to focus, on that mimicking and changing the context of it. So I actually have a question for you, Tom, or
Sure.
or other people. So, obviously, whenever there's a trigger or my little, I guess, my little mimicking trick that's been working for me, um, it still takes up my mental bandwidth. And it's like I'm spacing out. If somebody's trying to talk to me, and there's a triggering sound, it takes up my mental bandwidth, or I'm doing that mimicking trick. So I'm kind of spacing out. So there's kind of like, I don't know if it would be considered collateral damage,
Yeah.
but the person talking to me thinks, what you're saying is not important because I'm spacing out. Meanwhile, in my head, I've got this gigantic war going on where I'm trying to wrestle with my misophonia or, trying to manage it somehow. So it's almost like a collateral damage because the other person thinks what they're saying is not important. And so, Tom, what are ways to kind of manage that in terms of, I'm dealing with this disorder. What you're saying is important to me and it's interesting. I don't have the mental bandwidth to do both. Does that question make sense or?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Makes a lot of sense. So,
Okay.
so Sean, if you can tell if you can, so what you're doing is a misophonia treatment activity that will gradually reduce the severity of your misophonia response. Would you agree that it brings it down in the moment, which you've explained, but also have you noticed that it's getting easier at all to do this with any of these sounds, or you can do it more predictably or more reliably, or that the intensity of the triggers are going down? Have you noticed any decay yet in the fundamental reflexes involved here?
So it's something that I've just started doing
Okay.
maybe, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. I have noticed I'm a little bit better at it. I think with practice, it is going to get better. But again, the big
No,
telltale sign. Oh, go
I
ahead.
know
Sorry.
but my point I want to make is that this is a way of reducing your misophonia severity over time. So the disruption to you will go down and go away as your trigger goes down and goes away. So that's one point. But you're right, it is a collateral damage. If somebody is at a dinner table and they're being triggered by the sound of somebody eating, and they can look out a window and see a tree, and they start noticing the little bends and the crooks of the limbs on the tree. They're just focusing on the details of that tree. That takes them out of the conversation. It's the same problem that you have. So when people do this mentally focusing away from the sound, focusing on other stimuli, that is a collateral damage. But it is a collateral damage that can start to lower your misophonia severity. And then as you start to focus on other things, you can focus on what's the conversation. If it was at a dinner time, you could focus on more of the conversation rather than on the sound of the eatings, and it can get you back in to carry on. So a similar story, Sean, was told by a man named Scott, who was at the very first Misophonia conference and has been at tons of ones. And he was the person who taught me about the importance of relaxing. And he said that at first he would do this when he was having a conversation with his mother, because his mother was a safe person, and he could start to, just kind of relax and and kind of even zone out a little bit, right? But because it was a safe context, she was okay with him doing that. And so the more he relaxed around triggers, the his misophonia severity went down, and his response to individual triggers went down. So as you find something like this to do, the goal is not to do it forever. The goal is to do it to bring down your misophonia, and then not need to do it as much or at all.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I have, in the short time I've been doing it, I have noticed some improvements, and it is getting a little easier for me. So, that's definitely very nice especially when it's a sound I know 100% really before your treatment that it would have triggered me. And again, for me, my heart rate just goes bananas, and then I've got
Okay.
that mental conflict. But I have noticed it is getting a little easier. So hopefully over time with practice, like you said, it'll not be a thing, and I can still, shift some of my brain power to focusing on the conversation. So that
Right.
makes
And
sense.
especially if you're doing it with safe people. If you're doing it with somebody who knows you, have a little card in your pocket that you pull out that says, excuse me, I have a neurological condition called, a reflex condition called misophonia, where certain sounds are triggering me, and right now I'm trying to manage that. Can you give me a minute? I don't know. Something that
Yeah.
but doing it with safe people, doing it with people that's a good way that you can actually practice in those moments. So I wanted to share a story about this practicing thing. So Sean, thank you for sharing that. And I think this idea of just thinking crunch, 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 like, oh, they sound like a horse eating, or something that changes the context. That's a great example of doing that. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. And again, just to emphasize, I think that the mimicking, like pretending I'm there with them doing the sound, because again, if I'm at a table eating crunching chips with people,
Mm-hmm.
their crunching generally doesn't trigger me. But if I'm not crunching chips, I typically get triggered. So for me, that's working. I know we're all different, but for me, that's working for kind of short-term triggers. So,
So
yep.
if they're crunching, does your jaw move a little bit?
Kind of, and sometimes sounds stupid, but I kind of maybe sometimes I'm bobbing my head while I'm trying to. Again, for me, I'm really playing with that idea of changing the context. I think you had talked about that before,
Yeah.
and even with like new triggers, I think that very quickly changing the context of a new trigger, like a sound, you're like, man, that sound sucks. But identifying that you're saying this sound sucks, and then quickly trying to whatever mental gymnastics I need to do to change the context of that new sound so that it doesn't become a new trigger. I think that's been helping me. Again, I think context is a huge component for my misophonia. Um, anyway, all right. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to share a story here of a man who had a breath holding reflex, and for motorcycles. And so the big motorcycles, vroom, type things, was just horrible triggers that they would drive by his house. And he when he heard that rev of the engine, his lizard brain stopped his breathing. So his treatment was to slow and steadily breathe while the motorcycles were passing, which is, the motorcycle passing his house is actually a good trigger, because it starts, you hear it, then he can start doing the breathing, and each time the motorcycle is passing, he's doing the breathing. It's a misophonia training event for his lizard brain. And his triggers went way down, doing very well. And then his neighbor started driving a little street bike back and forth on the road right behind our house. He says, I don't know what he was doing, but he was just going back and forth. It seemed like it was all day. And that wasn't a trigger at first, but he started thinking about it, started noticing it, started unconsciously holding his breath. Lizard brain started zapping him holding his breath. And his misophonia got worse and worse and worse and worse to that trigger sound, because it was there all day long. And it just overwhelmed him. And the main take home I want you to take is that if he had recognized that it was a trigger, that it was starting to trigger him, and remembered that he was supposed to breathe slowly and steadily when he heard that sound, it would have gone down. It would have gone away. Or it would have never, back to Sean's comment about something that's becoming a trigger, it would have never have become a trigger if he said, oh, that's annoying. Oh, I better breathe. And start doing the slow, steady breathing when he was hearing it, and then carrying on. He could have avoided that from ever becoming a significant trigger. But he didn't. He didn't remember. And remembering to relax, remembering to breathe is very difficult when you're being attacked by a trigger. So I've probably shown this to you before, but this is my misophonia imitator. And whenever I meet with somebody, I want to give the demonstration that it's like trigger, trigger, and you're actually being physically jabbed when you experience a trigger. But that jab is coming from your lizard brain, not the other person, right? So Marge's comment about the husband touching the mustache, if it's not him jabbing you, Marge, it's your lizard brain that's jabbing you. And so understanding that lizard brain is jabbing you, and relaxing and breathing and focusing away is a way of gently reducing the severity of that trigger. So small triggers, when we're relaxing, focusing on other things, Sean changing the context, anything like that, all of those things can slowly bring down that misophonia reaction. If we can remember to breathe and relax and focus on other things and carry on, which is very hard to do. It's very hard to do when someone is attacking you and you're being physically assaulted. So, okay, Marge, you popped up. Do you want to? Sean has his hand up. Sean, go ahead.
Desires don't even try.
Hey, Tom, I just wanted a super quick comment. That
Sure.
model you put up, that was that Mitchell Dozier model. That made a lot of sense to me. And I just wanted to say that for me, what you're talking about, there is that kind of short window of trying to, contain for me, again, heart rate and rage. There's kind of a short little, I don't know if I think you've mentioned 2 seconds in there. There is kind of a short window where I need to start doing what I'm doing that works for me. because once it starts, down the path, it's tough to kind of contain it. So what you're saying about kind of that initial thing and being on top of it with the relaxation, also that's kind of the first thing I'm trying to learn to do is relaxing the muscle that we identified. And then and then I start doing those kind of mental mimicking and context things. But
Mm-hmm.
if I don't catch it, you know, again, maybe it is 2 seconds. I'm not sure. I'm not timing it, but there is kind of that short window where I need to start kind of doing that. So that model you put up, yeah, it's on the screen now. That actually made a lot of sense to me. The research. Quick question, if I may.
Sure.
That research that's happening with Sam Spencer.
Yeah.
What phase of that model is the focus of that research?
The
Yeah,
whole model.
the whole thing. Okay, great, awesome.
Right. Because if you have bad anticipatory anxiety, then you need to work on that. If you have these prolonged mental review, you need to reduce that. If you have a physical reflex, which everybody does pretty much, that's a note. Everybody can't always find it, but we believe that everybody does have a initial physical reflex. Then you want to work on that also. So it's really working on the entire model here in a holistic way. Sean, there's one thing that you mentioned about that. Let me clarify one thing about this 2-second thing that you've experienced. One of the very early studies of misophonia was done by Edelstein, and it had people measuring the heart rate of people and the galvanic skin response of people, meaning the sweating that comes from being triggered. And so on the sweating data, they had these graphs that showed the response. I noticed that it took 2 or 3 seconds before the sweating started after the trigger started. So there was a delay, and then you get more of a physical explosion. And I think that's what you're experiencing is a delay in this physiological distress response, which is, again, they had it at 2 to 3 seconds. What I'm talking about with the 2-second window is an invisible learning event for your lizard brain. That the lizard brain hears a sound, zaps the muscle, and then it goes, neurotic and insecure. Oh no, did I do the right thing? Sean, did I hit the right muscle here? Are you going to tighten it? And if for 2 seconds it's watching that muscle, and if you relax, it goes, oh, I did the wrong thing. And if you tighten it, it goes, oh, good, I did the right thing. I'll keep doing it. So it's interesting. This is what you're experiencing in that first 2 seconds to 3 seconds that you need to get it under control before it explodes. Okay.
Yeah, and again, once it starts, my heart rate goes, the anger, I have to just go through my normal kind of, I guess, coping mechanisms
Yeah.
of listening, leaving the room or putting earbuds in, listening to music. And for me, playing mobile games takes my mind off of things. But once that starts, my little mimicking context thing it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So it's about catching it early in that little window.
That's great. So let me make a comment about triggers, and I mentioned this with about counter-conditioning a trigger. That for the man who had the motorcycle driving past his house trigger, it was good because he could hear the motorcycle coming, he could start the breathing, and the breathing is the counter-conditioning event for his trigger. And so it became a learning opportunity for his lizard brain to have the motorcycle drive past his house. A very difficult trigger is one that occurs like instantly, like a sniff or a door closing, and then it doesn't happen again. because when a trigger is going on for 5 seconds, the first bump, you hear the trigger. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this. You hear the trigger and it hits your muscle, and you kind of go, ah! And then you go, no, I need to relax. Trigger, trigger, trigger. And you're having multiple triggers so that you can have multiple learning events. With the door slamming, it's bump, trigger. Oh no, I need to start relaxing. Well, I'm relaxing now, but nothing's happening. And now I'm not relaxing anymore because it's been 5 minutes, and then bam, and then you don't have that learning event from a multiple happening trigger. So Marge, for you with this visual trigger, it's one that you can, that's continuing, that you can close your eyes and relax and breathe, and then open your eyes briefly and then relax and breathe, that you're actually going to be relaxed when you see a little bit of it and you close your eyes. That can change your misophonia, right? Taking it in small doses. The key is taking a trigger and very microdosing the trigger, right? If you can microdose the trigger, it can go away. I'm working with a college student age lady who's triggered by her father, and visually. And so what she did is she got a video of her father, and she put the little video screen on her computer window down at the bottom, and occasionally she would relax, run her mouse over there, click, click, and then go back to what she was doing. So she would click, get a little bit of dad moving, and then stop it. And as she would relax and get just a tiny bit of dad, visual of dad chewing, her lizard brain started backing off. And as the lizard brain backed down for a 1 second, view of it in a little bitty window, then she could take a 3-second view of him chewing and relaxing, and then she could make it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and the videos stopped triggering her. Now, one video doesn't eliminate a real life visual trigger, but she had done it on 2 different videos and was going for more samples of her dad, visual trigger of her dad. And I haven't seen her lately, but to see how she's progressing. But that's the kind of gentle, tiny exposure to triggers that allows your lizard brain to let it go and learn to stop zapping you. Because the key with this, back to the rubber band, is that there's that trigger, and you're being physically assaulted by your lizard brain when you get the trigger. Okay, other thoughts or comments? Questions?
Well, it just really helps. It really helps that to know like how the lizard brain is trying to do the right thing. Just knowing that, like, and then, I mean, that helps me a lot. Just like it's trying to do the right thing, and it makes mistakes and all that, and yeah.
Well, it's following you, Marge. It's trying to follow you. The lizard brain is the ultimate follower. And if you will relax, it will relax. But it's simply trying to help you. And by the way, it's not a defect. Misophonia is not caused by a neurological defect. Okay, it seems that misophonia is caused more by perfectionism. That there's something that so there was this one study recently that found that 97% of their misophonia group had perfectionism. And the problem of, by the way, it's good that you want to do things right. You want to be, almost every teenager I meet with misophonia is a good student. That they're a straight A student, they do all their homework, they do all the things right. So perfectionism has some good characteristics with it. But one of the things that perfectionism does is it makes you kind of black and white. Something is either right or it's wrong. And if it's wrong, then you go, they're not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to be done that way. And you have a physical reaction with that mental thought of they're doing the wrong thing. And so the lizard brain doesn't see the thought, it just says there's that stimulus and there that muscle is tightening. So one of the goals of the people I work with is to try to not be so black and white on what's right and wrong. I think a lot of the eating triggers develop because mother tells, their son to chew quietly or chew with your mouth closed. And the child takes that request, chew with your mouth closed or chew quietly, as chew silently. And when you make that rule, chew silently, that's now his rule of what mom has said. And so then when he hears his sister chewing, she's breaking the rule. And that focus on the fact that she's breaking the rule causes the physical reactions to develop. But it's normal neurology. It's not a defect. You do not have some chemical imbalance in your brain or neurons shorting out and cross-wired or some defect in your upper brain telling you that these sounds are going to hurt you. But it's almost like alien possession, right? It just overwhelms you. But it's not. It's normal human neurology. Jeff Marsh, what do you have to say? You got to unmute.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. I muted you earlier. So.
Okay, yeah. So one question or one issue I have is how do you, there's kind of a fine line between experiencing the trigger and trying to desensitize or decondition, but then there's, you want to do it in small doses, but sometimes you don't have control over that. So how do you, it's hard to not be exposed and then try to, then there's this avoidant part and kind of figuring out kind of when you want to not avoid something, because then that can make it worse.
So one of the rules that I give people that I work with is to watch your distress. That if you're in a situation where a trigger is happening and you can use Sean's trick of changing the context and making it funny, and you're kind of zoning out, but you're making it funny, and your distress level is coming down, or the trigger severity is feeling is coming down, then it's okay to stay because your misophonia is not getting any worse. It's actually getting better. If, however, you have a small trigger and it's continuing, and you're becoming more annoyed and more upset and more distressed, and your distress level is going up, you're making your misophonia worse, and you need to go to the bathroom, you need to change the environment, you need to do something to stop that, to get out of that progression, because you're making your misophonia worse. So having an escape plan is really good. Knowing the environment that you're going to be dealing with as to whether this is going to be a dangerous, a likely dangerous environment situation where you're not going to be able to get away if they start triggering you. Those are situations where you really want to try to take control and avoid that prolonged misophonia distress. So, part of this, Jeff, is doing triggers with people that you're close to, that you're flexible with, that can not be bothered or upset if you turn up the noise on your phone. Noise app on your phone is great because it will, come on, phone. But a noise app like this one here, White Noise by TMSOFT, and it comes up and it will play all kinds of musics and sounds and such. And I don't know why it is coming up and wanting me to do this right now. Dismiss. Okay, so this can play a mix of sounds, and you can play it. AirPod Pros are fantastic because you can have them in transparency mode so that you can still hear through them as if you didn't have them in your ear, and you can play a little noise into your ear. But having some kind of a management technique planned that you can use to prevent prolonged misophonia distress.
My trigger is a little different. It's kind of outside neighbor noise, and so, I open the windows and I play music in the background, but sometimes I can still hear it, and
Okay.
then I'm trying to desensitize and keep the windows open, and I feel bad about shutting the windows, which does block out the noise. I mean, I am able to do that, but then I feel like I'm avoiding.
Well, there are times to avoid, Jeff, and there's times to treat.
Uh,
I ask you to try to live your life in one of two modes, either misophonia treatment,
mhm.
meaning you're going to be relaxing and breathing. Do you know where your physical reflex is?
Yeah, it's kind of, I stop breathing and
Okay.
and I
Okay.
tighten up in my shoulders.
Okay, so you want to be doing that, what I call scuba breathing, slow, steady breathing, humming, singing, um, talking, as long as you continually talk, does that. But you want to be having that willful breathing and relaxing your shoulders. Now, if you can relax your shoulders and breathe and watch a show on TV or play a video game or whatever, great. Or just hang out with friends, great. But there's going to be other times that you're not able to remember to breathe and relax. And so in those times, it's perfectly good to block the trigger so that you can carry on. If you work from home, at least part-time, as many of us do, if you're getting that sound coming in while you're trying to focus and work, it's not good, right? It's very distressing.
Yeah.
So when you need to concentrate and focus and do something, then shut the windows and turn on some noise in the room so that you're not being triggered. It's having noise in the room and no triggers does not harm your misophonia. Doesn't make your misophonia worse. Now, if you're anxious about it and you're paranoid about where's the next trigger going to come, I got to get this on, I got to get this sound on, and you're trying to just do everything to prevent any trigger from happening, that's horrible. That's horrible for misophonia because it makes it worse and worse and worse. But if you say, okay, right now it's work time, I'm going to block out the triggers. This is leisure time. I'm going to block out the triggers because I'm going to sit here and talk to my girlfriend or whatever. Or this is normal misophonia treatment time. We're going to open the windows and I'm going to be cooking a meal and we're going to be having food and I'll be relaxing and breathing and carrying on. Then that's your misophonia treatment time. So try to live your life in either just live without triggers happening, block the triggers out, or it's a treatment time. And I'm going to allow the triggers to come into my life, but I'm going to keep them small. I'm going to breathe and relax and carry on.
Well, so the question is, how long do you live in the treatment time?
Well,
So that you're not constantly being exposed to the triggers.
yeah, you know, is your misophonia distress, is the reaction to the trigger staying low and coming down? Then you can do it as long as you want to. You could do it for 15 minutes, you could do it for 30 minutes, you could do it for 2 hours if that's what you wanted to do. But you could do it just 30 minutes a day. So it's like playing the piano. How long should I practice the piano each day?
Great, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Loud, you got your hands up. What's up?
Oh, yeah, I had one question about one thing that you said, that this is kind of not a circumstance of abnormal physiology or neurology. If that's the case, why doesn't everybody have misophonia then? If it's normal, because there's something wrong somewhere, something's being processed inappropriately, or something's causing that.
Well, it's learned. Why doesn't everybody speak Spanish? Well, that's probably not a good rule. Why doesn't everybody drive a car? Because they haven't learned to drive a car. So I was coming out of one of the church buildings here in town. I'd been putting away the Cub Scout race. I was a Cub master, and we had the big racetrack for their Pinewood Derby, and I saw this guy in the the building for some reason. This is during the day. He was there at the church building, and his name was Henry, and he's Polynesian. He's Hawaiian, and the thought hit me. He said, "Henry, you know, you're Hawaiian. You're pretty laid back, aren't you?" He goes, "Oh yeah, we're very laid back." And I just thought to myself, I wonder if you looked at people who were laid back and chilled versus people who were anxious and trying to do everything right, perfectionism, would you see a difference in the misophonia rates? And I think you would. So Lyle, I think you have to be aware enough of the world around you to even notice that somebody's doing something wrong by your rule, by your rule, okay? And so a lot of people are just oblivious. And if they're oblivious, they're not going to develop a misophonia trigger. But a good example of a person developing a trigger would be a surgeon with a pager, because they have to have the pager. They hear the page because they're on call for the hospital. The page goes, brrr, goes off, and they go, "Oh no, somebody's dying," which is a normal reaction. But that develops that physical reflex where most of the people with misophonia hear somebody chewing and saying, "They're breaking the rule," and they develop it. Go ahead, Lyle.
No, I guess so. You're considering that normal physiology or neurology, then it's not abnormal. I mean, it just seems to me that everybody would have it if that were the case.
Well, everybody doesn't have the same experience, and they don't react to things the same way. And so if you take a family where there's been some kind of traumatic experience for the family, and there's 5 kids, that the 5 kids almost always remember it differently as to how they experienced the situation. So it's part of this is the way you as an individual viewed the stimuli that you were hearing and that things were happening, and how you reacted to it. Part of it is also people who potentially were in a home situation where they were not respected. And when they said, "Oh, you're chewing too loud," or "Stop smacking your lips," the other kid just smacks it more. And
Mhm.
so now they're feeling disrespected and all the things, the emotions that go with that, and then the physiological emotions that go with that, and then the reflex develops.
As I recall it, or as I've called it, you would get yelled at the dinner table a lot when I was growing up, and that wasn't unusual.
Yeah, and would you get yelled at for table manners, or would you just get yelled at for schoolwork, or?
It was usually schoolwork or inappropriate behavior, but the point was it was negative what I was doing. And I was a bad person at this point, and I would associate the bad feelings, I guess, with the sounds.
Right.
But I don't
And
think that's normal behavior. Everybody didn't do it. My brother didn't do that. My father and brother had transient hyperacusis, which I guess is the same area of the brain, but they didn't have the misophonia like I did.
okay, so I think it's different areas of the brain, because misophonia fundamentally is not a hearing part of the brain. It's a reflex beyond the hearing, because you get
Okay.
triggers in through your eyes and through your nose and vibration. And so the core of misophonia is beyond the sensory input boundary. So you're just mentioning about having your brothers getting yelled at and you getting yelled at, and that now that you're annoyed and you've been yelled at, and that you're a sensitive kid, or you're a stubborn kid, whatever the case may be, and then you're putting your focus on, let's say, on your father who did the yelling, and you're like glaring at him, and when you're glaring at him, you're noticing his eating sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? We're nice and talkative toward the end here. Anything else? If I have a question or a comment or something you want to say? Well, I will. Go,
I
yes,
do have
please.
one.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is probably a topic for another time, but I mean, I'm just curious how this fits in with the theory of like that that misophonia is like you're like the caveman walking through a jungle and they hear a twig break, and then that signals to them that there's a tiger there and they better run. How does that fit in with what you're saying? I mean, what?
So
Yeah,
there's
like
two.
the misophonia, they're being the trigger is like you're being attacked.
Right. And so if you well, there are people who think that misophonia is just like, I'm protecting my food or I'm being attacked. But if you think about the sound in the jungle, that crack sound, if it's a little bitty limb, then it's not a problem. But that crack, they know that there's a tiger there. They've been taught about tigers, and therefore they hear that crack, and there's a physical reaction, and they run. And so they're back at the campfire, and somebody cracks a limb, and they don't care, right? Because the context is not there. So in one respect, that caveman who's going to run because they hear a crack in the jungle is because they've experienced that sound and they know there's danger, and they have a physical jolt to their body, and they run. And so that's a reflex, a learned reflex. And so this theory matches the learned reflex part of it. There are some people who just say, oh, this is just kind of a social thing. If I'm protecting my food and I don't want to be with everybody else eating because I don't want them to steal my food. And those, it's not it doesn't, it's contrary to that theory. But we have, let me go back to this model here and just very quickly, where's my share button? Share this and say that now you're seeing this, that I have had probably over 2,000 people where I have tested for this physical reflex and found and showed the people that there is a physical reflex. Even in just a small group of 10, and by the way, some of these already knew about the reflex because they had been to Misophonia sessions, conferences, and I talked about this, but half of these people didn't think they had a reflex, but when I showed it to them, 4 out of 5, giving us 9 here total, said, yes, I have an initial physical reflex. So it is rare that I meet with somebody when I cannot help them identify their initial physical reflex. Okay, Raj, your hand is up. You're going to be the last participant of the day. Tell us what's up.
Nothing. I just want to say something that I've never heard you say, or if you've said it, it didn't register because it doesn't make sense in how mine started. You said misophonia is beyond a hearing boundary.
Yes, correct. And
that
the reason
doesn't make sense.
Well, the reason I say that, Roz, is do you have any visual triggers?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have a visual trigger, is that a hearing boundary related?
I'm relating this to the very first time I was aware.
Right, but I'm saying
and it wasn't. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is that because misophonia can either coming in through your eyes or your nose or your ears or touch, that those specific sensory organs are not the problem. The problem is beyond the sensory input, the way the brain responds to the sensory input. So when you first develop misophonia to auditory, in fact, 99% of people develop their first trigger to an auditory stimulus. And auditory is definitely involved, but the zap and the emotions are beyond the hearing. It's what the brain does with that hearing sense organ input to the brain.
So you're saying it's connected to the brain?
Or well, you say the brain, but it's connected to the brain stem and to the, yes, it's beyond the hearing. If you drew a box that said, here's my hearing, here's my breathing, smell, here's my sensory inputs, right? And the brain has a connection that takes the sensory inputs and then it does something with them. And so misophonia is what the brain is doing with a sensory input rather than an issue of the sensory processing part of the brain. Because you get it in through your eyes, your nose, your ears, etc.
So they need to develop something to help our brains, period.
Well, that's exactly why I go back to this model that says this is what you need to do to help your brain, is you need to get rid of this physical reflex here. And to see if I can quickly go up to where I show this when I meet with people. Okay, so here's a model of misophonia, and we've got this physical reflex. And if you can break this physical reflex, it breaks the chain. And that's why if you have a breath reflex, you need to keep breathing. But when you become overwhelmed and you can't remember to breathe, it causes misophonia to go up. If you can remember to breathe or relax with small triggers, then the physical reflex comes down. And as the physical reflex comes down, all the other components come down. And then you're in a situation and you're stuck there and you're panicking and guess what happens? The physical reflex comes back up. So we're not dealing with something that we can take pills and get rid of. We're dealing with Pavlovian conditioned reflexes.
Okay.
Okay. Jeff, did you have a comment or a question?
Hold on. Oh,
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you there. Raise your hand if you have a question. So anyway, I want to basically come back to where was I with these? So this is the 8th week of doing these activities. And let's see, I have some chat here. I'm looking to see whether I have anybody, no questions in the chat for me. If anybody has a question for me, you'd have to ask it direct. So, because I don't have time to read the chat while we're doing this. Okay, so I want to share this and say this is the 8th session of Misophonia questions and answers on a Saturday morning. Gonna probably not have any more of these sessions until probably July the 26th. I'm being invaded from the west by my son and grandson from Taiwan. I'm being invaded from the south by my daughter and her family, and probably 4 of her 5 boys will be coming with her. And I'm being invaded from the east by my daughter and her family. So it's going to be a fun summer for me. And I will probably be playing with grandkids and kids for the next Saturday mornings for a while. So it's been a pleasure sharing this with you, talking with you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about misophonia. I've been working on it for the last 12 and a half years and find it to be extremely interesting, and it's very satisfying to be able to help people with this peculiar condition but very common condition. So I would say thank you very much, everyone. And you can, if you feel free to send me an email if you have a question, or if you want to get help from me, send me an email and I'll send you information about the work that I do with people. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.